A desperate mother is actually undergoing a horrifying supernatural transformation. After surviving a brutal attack in the woods, she begins exhibiting disturbing cravings, aggressively devouring raw, bloody meat right out of her refrigerator. What is truly hair-raising is that as her infant son cries out for her, she completely loses control, violently snarling at her own child and revealing a fresh set of razor-sharp fangs. Horrified by the bloodthirsty monster she is rapidly becoming, and realizing the fatal danger she poses to her baby, the woman makes an agonizing choice. She grabs a pair of heavy pliers and brutally rips her own fangs straight out of her gums to protect her son. The story actually begins years earlier, on a freezing winter night. A man named Nikolai is driving through a heavy snowstorm with his wife Nadja and their infant son Elias. Suddenly, their car begins to violently sputter, and thick smoke billows from the engine, forcing them to pull over in the middle of nowhere. Hoping to find assistance, Nikolai bravely steps out into the freezing cold to get help. Nadja and her baby wait patiently inside the freezing vehicle for hours, but her husband never returns. Fearing the absolute worst, she finally steps outside and follows his deep footprints left in the thick snow. The trail eventually leads her to a strange, isolated house in the woods. Cautiously approaching, she notices disturbing, bloody footprints scattered across the front porch. She quietly pushes the door open and follows the grim trail deeper into the pitch-black basement. Suddenly, a terrifying, monstrous man lunges at her from the shadows. Paralyzed by fear, Nadja instantly turns and sprints for her life, rushing into an adjacent room. As she slowly backs away from the door, she trips over something on the floor. Looking down, her blood runs cold. It is Nikolai's mutilated dead body. Outside the room, the feral monster begins violently smashing against the door, trying to break in and finish the job. In a desperate move for survival, Nadja grabs a broken wooden stick and fiercely pushes the creature back through the splintered wood. At that exact moment, the morning sun finally rises. The UV rays instantly ignite the monster, burning the creature to ashes in seconds. However, as Nadja collapses in exhaustion, she looks down and makes a horrifying discovery. During the frantic struggle, she was bitten on the hand. This directly leads to the terrifying events we saw at the beginning, where Nadja begins mutating, drinking raw blood, and ultimately ripping out her own fangs to keep her son safe. Refusing to live in fear, Nadja bandages her mouth and bravely returns to the strange house to demand answers. Finding the place completely dark, she flicks on the lights and cautiously creeps through the messy living room. Suddenly, she turns around and comes face to face with a strange, bald, elderly man. He coldly tells her that he knew she would return, aggressively accusing her of murdering his son. Nadja firmly defends herself, stating that his monstrous son bit her first. Refusing to listen, the old man pulls out a heavy shotgun and fires a blast at her, completely missing his target. Using her newfound supernatural agility, Nadja fiercely pushes the man to the floor. She grabs his own heavy metal crutches and brutally smashes them into his face over and over again. As he bleeds out, the old man repeatedly mutters that this evil disease cannot be allowed to keep spreading. Finally ending his life, Nadja searches the house and finds a hidden box filled with a mysterious medicine, a chemical suppressant designed to control the overwhelming vampire thirst for blood. To erase the nightmare once and for all, she grabs a gallon of gasoline, drenches the entire property, and lights the house on fire, burning the curse to the ground. The camera then shifts to several years later. Nadja, who now strictly views her vampirism as a medical disease rather than a supernatural curse, prepares to board an overnight flight with her young son Elias. They are traveling across the ocean to seek advanced treatment from a medical specialist. Right before stepping onto the plane, she discreetly goes to the restroom and injects the mysterious suppressant medicine into her arm to keep her dark urges hidden. However, just minutes after the plane successfully takes off, absolute chaos erupts. A highly organized group of armed hijackers suddenly stands up, swiftly executing the undercover air marshals and the pilot. They aggressively take total control of the aircraft, holding all the terrified passengers hostage. In the confusion, Elias notices a hidden service hatch on the plane's map. Waiting for the perfect moment when the guards look away, the brave little boy makes a run for it. Fearing for his life, Nadja instantly jumps out of her seat and chases after him. But before she can reach the aisle, she is intercepted by a ruthless hijacker named 8-Ball. Without a shred of hesitation, 8-Ball raises his pistol and shoots Nadja straight in the chest. She collapses backward, completely lifeless. Seeing this, 8-Ball aims his weapon at Elias to finish the job, but the team's leader quickly stops him, forcefully dragging the crying boy back to his seat. But the mercenaries have no idea what they just unleashed. Just minutes after being fatally shot, Nadja's eyes snap open. Her supernatural healing abilities kick in, bringing her back from the dead. She quietly pries open a locked access door and drops down into the dark, freezing cargo hold. Because her body had to repair the massive bullet wound, she is now incredibly weak and in desperate need of fresh blood. Creeping through the luggage, she spots a dog locked inside a travel cage. Giving in to her primal instincts, she sinks her teeth into the animal. Unfortunately, a hijacker named Jurij hears the commotion, walks over to investigate, and catches her in the act. Before he can even raise his weapon, Nadja violently lunges at him. She effortlessly overpowers the armed man, strangles him, and greedily drinks his blood. As the fresh blood courses through her veins, her bullet wounds completely seal up, and her razor-sharp fangs rapidly grow back. Realizing she is losing her humanity, she frantically pulls out her medical kit and tries to inject the suppressant. Suddenly, a radio on Jurij's dead body crackles to life. Nadja listens closely and discovers the hijackers' true, sinister motive. They plan to deliberately crash the plane, framing the passengers for a terrorist attack so they can manipulate the airline's stock market shares, heavily profiting before jumping out with parachutes. Realizing there is no other way out, Nadja makes the ultimate sacrifice. She completely abandons the cure, choosing to stay in her monstrous form to save her son and the innocent people on board. Using the air vents, Nadja stealthily climbs back up to the main cabin, drops down from the ceiling, and successfully grabs Elias. She takes him safely to the cockpit, only to discover the controls have been locked on autopilot. Knowing she cannot land the massive aircraft herself, she sneaks back to the passenger cabin and urgently asks if anyone has flight experience. A brave passenger immediately stands up, claiming he has spent hours on advanced flight simulators. Nadja quickly escorts him to the cockpit and secures the heavy steel doors. They formulate a risky plan. They will stay safely locked inside, wait for the mercenaries to parachute out, and then defuse the bomb and land the plane. Meanwhile, down in the cargo hold, 8-Ball discovers the horrific, blood-drained corpse of his teammate. He instantly realizes that the woman he shot is not only alive, but something deeply unnatural. Upstairs, the hijacking leader, Berg, marches to the passenger cabin and demands to know where the woman went. A terrified hostage points toward the front of the plane. Berg angrily stomps up to the cockpit and points his gun directly at a hostage through the door's peephole, aggressively demanding Nadja to open up. When Nadja completely ignores his threats, Berg ruthlessly executes the man. Seeing that his intimidation isn't working, Berg suddenly grabs a little girl from the crowd and presses his gun to her head. Seeing an innocent child in danger causes Nadja to completely snap. She throws the cockpit doors open and launches herself forward with incredible speed. She tackles Berg to the floor, violently sinking her fangs deep into his neck. Giving in to her absolute rage, she moves like a blur, viciously slaughtering several armed hijackers in seconds. However, before she can finish off the rest of the crew, she looks back and realizes a massive problem. Berg is writhing on the floor, rapidly mutating into a vampire from her infected bite. Thinking fast, she grabs a combat knife and brutally stabs him straight through the heart, permanently stopping the mutation. Covered in blood and realizing her primal instincts are taking over, Nadja fears she might accidentally hurt her own son. She retreats into the cockpit and completely locks herself inside the small bathroom. Down in the cabin, 8-Ball rummages through Nadja's abandoned luggage. He finds her personal diary and her medical supplies, finally piecing together that she is an actual vampire. Embracing the hunt, he pulls out a large wooden stick and begins carving it into a sharp stake. Watching the security monitors from the cockpit, Elias sees the psychotic mercenary coming for his mother. Refusing to leave her behind, he yanks the combat knife out of Berg's chest, uses it to pry open the locked bathroom door, and desperately drags his mother out. But before they can make it back to safety, 8-Ball completely cuts off their escape route. Knowing she has to protect Elias, Nadja forcefully pushes her son behind a barrier and steps forward to face the killer. But 8-Ball is heavily prepared. Before she can strike, he whips out a powerful military-grade UV light and shines it directly into her face, dropping her to her knees in agony. Taking advantage of her weakened state, 8-Ball pulls out a medical syringe and forcefully sucks out a large amount of Nadja's infected blood. Just as he raises his sharpened wooden stake to deliver the final, fatal blow, Elias suddenly steps out of the shadows, pointing a heavy handgun directly at the mercenary. Thinking the little boy doesn't have the guts to pull the trigger, 8-Ball smirks and confidently walks forward, easily slapping the weapon out of Elias's hands. But as the gun falls, Elias squeezes the trigger. Instantly, a massive, explosive decompression rips through the plane. Using her supernatural strength, Nadja crawls across the chaotic floor, grabs a dropping oxygen mask, and firmly secures it over her son's face. Because she is undead, the lack of oxygen doesn't affect her at all. However, the sudden depressurization instantly kills the young piloting the plane. The remaining mercenaries manage to take control of the aircraft, forcefully lowering it to a safe, breathable altitude. Knowing 8-Ball is still a massive threat, Nadja hands Elias over to Farid, completely trusting him to keep her son safe, and ventures out into the cargo hold to finish the fight. She eventually spots 8-Ball hiding inside a heavily armored, bulletproof SUV parked in the luggage bay. She fires a stolen rifle at the vehicle, but the thick glass easily deflects the bullets. Angered, she rips a heavy metal pipe from the plane's structure and aggressively pierces it straight through the windshield. But 8-Ball grabs the rod from the inside and forcefully pulls it in, disarming her. With a maniacal smile, he pulls out the syringe filled with Nadja's thick blood and injects it directly into his own hand. Knowing exactly what is about to happen, Nadja watches his eyes turn red as he begins to rapidly mutate. She sprints to a nearby supply crate, grabs a bottle of high-proof alcohol and a box of matches. She dumps the flammable liquid straight through the hole in the windshield and tosses in a lit match. The interior of the SUV instantly engulfs in massive flames, seemingly burning the mutating killer alive. However, just as the plane levels out at a normal altitude, the co-pilot detects the smoke and hits the cargo bay's emergency fire suppression system. Thick foam rains down, instantly extinguishing the fire and saving 8-Ball's life. Hearing the surviving hijackers making their way down to the cargo hold, Nadja realizes she is outnumbered and immediately climbs back up into the ceiling vents to reach the cockpit. The armed men cautiously open the charred SUV doors, expecting to find a crispy corpse. Instead, a fully transformed, heavily burned 8-Ball lunges out of the smoke and instantly sinks his fangs into his own teammate's neck. One of the terrified mercenaries manages to escape the bloodbath and climbs the ladder back up to the main cabin, but he is swiftly tackled to the floor by Nadja, frantically checking his neck for bite marks. Realizing that if the mutated 8-Ball gets out of the cargo hold, he will infect the entire plane, she slams the heavy metal floor hatch shut. However, the terrified passengers have completely lost their minds. Seeing Nadja covered in blood and sporting fangs, they assume she is the monster trying to kill them. A panicked passenger grabs a discarded gun and fires a shot directly into Nadja's shoulder. The sudden pain and the sheer betrayal completely snap her remaining sanity. Seeing the very people she is trying to protect turn against her, she gives in to her monstrous nature. She lunges into the crowd, tossing people aside, and even aggressively leaps at Farid, the man she trusted to protect her son. Just inches before her fangs pierce Farid's throat, Elias screams for her to stop. The sound of her little boy's voice instantly breaks the bloodlust, and she snaps back to reality. Suddenly, a chorus of horrifying guttural screams echoes from below the floorboards. The infected mercenaries have fully transformed. Nadja frantically rushes to push more heavy luggage onto the hatch, but the mutated 8-Ball possesses incredible unnatural strength, forcefully pushing the metal doors forward. Seeing her struggling, Farid bravely rushes in to help add weight to the door, but an infected arm reaches through the gap and viciously bites him on the hand. Just then, a brave passenger grabs a gun and shoots blindly through the gap, forcing 8-Ball to drop back down, giving Nadja just enough time to slam the heavy doors shut. Knowing the infection spreads rapidly through the bloodstream, Nadja acts with brutal efficiency. She grabs a thick phone cord, ties a tight tourniquet around Farid's arm, grabs a fire axe, and violently chops his infected hand completely off to save his life. Realizing the front hatch is blocked, the swarm of vampires begins tearing their way up through the rear access panels of the plane. Nadja reacts with lightning speed, sprinting to the back and locking the secondary doors, pushing massive crates in front of them to buy the passengers some time. But human stupidity proves to be the greatest threat. A dying, cowardly passenger slowly opens the barricaded door and begs one of the monstrous vampires to bite him, foolishly hoping it will grant him eternal life. Instead, the creature simply slaps the man aside, breaking the barricade and allowing the swarm to flood into the main cabin. The surviving humans frantically rush to the front of the plane, banging on the heavy cockpit doors and desperately pleading to be let inside. Farid and Nadja, safely locked in the cockpit with Elias, realize the grim truth. Every single person out there is going to turn. They formulate a final, desperate plan. Farid will land the plane, and then they will detonate the hijackers' explosives, and preventing the vampire plague from ever reaching the city. Nadja quickly rips open the floor panels to access the explosive charges wired to the fuel tanks, but her heart sinks. She realizes the detonator does not have an automatic timer. The only way to blow the plane is with a manual remote, which is currently sitting at the bottom of the vampire-infested cargo hold. Nadja bravely volunteers to stay behind and detonate it herself so the boys can escape, but Elias completely refuses to lose his mother. Before anyone can stop him, the brave little boy grabs the military UV light and squeezes himself straight into the narrow air conditioning shaft leading down to the hold. Dropping down into the pitch-black cargo bay, Elias uses the bright UV light to burn and blind the lurking creatures. He successfully reaches Berg's rotting body and snatches the detonator remote from his pocket. He turns around to leave. A snarling vampire drops down to attack him. Elias desperately rolls under a parked car to hide. Watching the horrific scene unfold on the security cameras, Nadja knows she has to act immediately. She throws open the cargo doors and tosses a dead body down the stairs as a bloody distraction. Before the terrifying 8-Ball can reach her son, Nadja drops from the ceiling and violently lunges at the monster from behind. But 8-Ball is heavily mutated and incredibly powerful. He easily overpowers her. Seeing his mother losing the fight, Elias bravely shouts at 8-Ball, taunting the beast and leading him closer to the exterior cargo doors. Waiting for the perfect moment, Elias presses a secondary button on the remote, violently blowing the heavy loading doors completely off their hinges. Taking advantage of the massive suction, Nadja fiercely kicks 8-Ball out of the plane. But the relentless monster manages to grab onto a metal strut. Just then, the morning sun begins to peek over the horizon. Seeing the light, Farid forcefully tilts the steering yoke, banking the entire airplane sideways. The golden sunlight floods directly into the open cargo bay, hitting 8-Ball and instantly incinerating him into a pile of ash. Exhausted and entirely drained of energy, Nadja collapses on the floor. Desperate to save her, Elias pulls out a knife, slices his own palm, and drops his fresh blood directly into his mother's mouth. Nadja's eyes snap open, but her humanity is completely gone. Fighting her own demonic instincts, she aggressively pushes her son away over and over again to protect him, before finally turning around and sprinting away into the dark shadows of the plane. Soon after, Farid masterfully lands the heavily damaged aircraft on a Scottish runway. As the plane comes to a halt, Elias safely climbs down the emergency slide. Heavily armed military soldiers instantly rush the tarmac, grabbing Elias and escorting him to a medical tent. However, because Farid is holding the plane's radio, the ignorant soldiers mistakenly believe he is one of the terrorist hijackers. Farid frantically screams at the soldiers, begging them not to open the cabin doors, but the arrogant commander ignores the warnings. The SWAT team breaches the plane, only to come face to face with an entire screeching swarm of bloodthirsty vampires. Elias watches the chaos unfold. Knowing exactly what must be done, the brave boy slips out of the medical tent and runs straight toward the overrun plane. Looking up, he sees his mother fully transformed and completely unrecognizable, viciously tearing into a soldier's neck. Hearing his footsteps, the monstrous Nadja drops the body and sprints aggressively toward her own son. Elias closes his eyes, pulls the hidden detonator remote, and presses the final button. A massive, fiery explosion completely engulfs the entire airplane, instantly destroying the vampire plague and ending his mother's tragic suffering once and for all. With the threat eliminated, Farid is finally freed by the surviving officers. He runs across the tarmac and tightly embraces Elias, who is utterly exhausted, traumatized, but finally safe.